How's it going? This is Dan from modular.dev. I'm here to do a live stream on Blazor. Blazor's been a technology that I've been using for a while, the WebAssembly version specifically, and I think it's good to learn if you're interested in C# or ASP.NET or anything like that. WebAssembly is, I think, going to be here to stay for a while. That's just my prediction. So I thought I would take you through a chat bot, not a chat bot, a real-time chat between maybe a couple different users using SignalR and Blazor WebAssembly. So if you've never used Blazor WebAssembly, I'll show you how to get started and we'll get right to it. Before you use Blazor WebAssembly, you probably should be somewhat familiar with C#. C# has been around for a really long time, and it's a great language, especially on the server side. Now, for the first time with Blazor WebAssembly, you can use it on the client side too, instead of JavaScript, which is awesome. But yeah, I really enjoy C#, and I hope you do too. And of course, you should be familiar with HTML, CSS, that type of stuff. And Blazor really is here to give an alternative to React, Vue, Angular, that type of thing. So if using a SPA framework like React or Vue interests you, but you want to try it in C#, Blazor would be the right fit for you. So let's go ahead and get started with a new project. So you can just go to new project up here. I'm using Visual Studio Community 2019. You could potentially use Visual Studio Code if that suits you better, but I'm using Community. So I'll use a Blazor app here, and I'll go put it in this folder, and I'll call this Chat Blazor app. So the first thing you're going to see is Blazor Server app or Blazor WebAssembly app. Blazor Server app is kind of an interesting concept. Basically, all of the HTML and all of the changes that would be done to the DOM are done on the server side. So the server kind of keeps a track of what everybody's doing. I don't necessarily like that as much, because if you're making a change, let's say in Blazor, maybe you want an event to happen every time you type or every time you click. There is that latency to go back to the server to figure out what should happen. But for some people, this might be okay if they don't have a lot of JavaScript that does that type of thing normally. Blazor Server might be fine. And in fact, you will get a faster startup time with Blazor Server than you would with Blazor WebAssembly, because there's less things to load for the client, which would be the end user of your website. Whereas the WebAssembly one, there's a lot more to it for them to download and for them to run it. So that's really the only advantage Blazor Server has, in my opinion. So I'm going to go with Blazor WebAssembly here. And I'm going to make it ASP.NET Core hosted and a progressive web application, because we may want to make this chatbot, or not chatbot, this chat system that we have here available for users to install on their devices. So that's what we want, progressive web application here. So I'll just go ahead and create that. All right, so because I did a ASP.NET Core hosted solution by checking that checkbox you saw earlier, we're going to see 3 projects. We're going to see a client project, a server project, and a shared project. The server project is going to be for your database calls, or whatever else you need to do that's on the server side. Anything that should be not accessible from the client, let's say maybe shared passwords or secrets or API keys or something like that, you're going to want to make sure those happen on the server side. You don't want those getting leaked. Even though WebAssembly is compiled, theoretically you could decompile that and those could get leaked out. So anything like that you're going to want to keep on the server side. Any business logic, any database calls, that type of stuff. So in here, this example app that that just got created for me, we see this weather forecast controller, and this weather forecast controller is just simulating some business logic, which we'll see in just a second. That is what the server one does. Now the shared one is going to have any kind of data models that you need to share between the server and the client. In this case, the one that was created for us is the weather forecast. Got a date, temperature, summary, and a temperature in Fahrenheit here. And this can be used on the server side or on the client side. So if you look in this controller on the server side here, we're adding a weather forecast object, which is that shared object that I was just showing you. Now on the client side, we can go ahead and I think it's in this fetch data one. We can get a list of weather forecasts by calling our server project. So that's how these things all interact together. Let's go ahead and run this just so you can see what it's like at first, and then we'll get through it. All right, and if you notice right at the beginning, there was that little bit of a loading thing there. That's because Blazor WebAssembly is loading up. So if you remember me talking about that at the very beginning, you're gonna have a little bit of a delay there, as far as everything kind of loading for the client. And if we do look in here at the network panel, I'll expand this out a bit so you can see it. I'm going to disable the cache here so we can see it all load again. There is quite a bit of things. Now, there's not as much as normal because there is, in addition to that cache, there is some local storage going on here. So I'm going to actually remove that so you can see, maybe it's sessions, maybe it's cache storage. Here it is. I'm going to remove all these things just so you can see the very first time your Blazor app loads exactly how much there is. So if you notice there's a lot now. So we just have a very basic app and we are at 6.6 megabytes transferred, which is quite a bit. Now I know they're working on making that smaller, so I hope they are able to do that. But if you notice again, if I refresh now, it is gone. So the second time it's much faster due to caching and things like that. So think about your use case, think about your users. Can they wait those few seconds, or is that something that's critical to your business? If so, you may not want to do Blazor WebAssembly, but I know they're working on making that smaller. So let's see here. So we're starting off here on the home screen, and just like any other single page application framework like Vue or React or Angular, whenever we change pages, we're not going to see the full page refresh here. We're only going to see the part of the page that's changing. So if you look here, when I changed to the counter, it was only this middle section here that changed. Same thing when I go to fetch data. This left sidebar and this header, they're never going away. There's never that white flash that you would normally see when you're loading a page, which is great. It's a very smooth experience for the user. So that's what you want. So that's pretty much the basics of Blazor. And just because every time you see a Blazor demo, you have to do this counter thing, so I'll show you what that does. We're actually updating this count here every time it's clicked, and normally you'd have to do JavaScript to do that, but in this case there is no JavaScript at all in this entire project. This happens in C#, so let me pull up the app here so you can see how that works. This is the counter page, basically. If you notice, it's got this page counter up here at the top. So that corresponds to this navigation here. So this page is what happens when they go there. Now, what you're going to see is it has a main layout, which has the navigation and all of that stuff. So this navigation never changes. What does change is what's in this body here. And this body gets pulled in from this counter component. So it is, at first, it may be a little bit confusing to see how those things work together. Feel free to shoot me any questions if you have them on that. But basically, just know we're getting into this counter component when we go to that page. And the first thing you're going to see here is this on click, which looks like a JavaScript event, but it's actually a C# event which gets handled by WebAssembly. So normally you would have an on click event like this, or maybe you would handle it in a separate JavaScript file. But we've actually got this little @ sign in front of it. And wherever you see the @ sign, that means that we're transitioning into C#. So this @ code here, this is a C# code block. This @ on click here is a C# event. And this @ current count right here is a C# variable that gets put into the HTML. So if we bring up the HTML again, you'll see we've got current count here, and then we've got a running variable that gets updated. And that variable is actually a C# variable getting updated every time you click that. So what happens is they click this, when you click this on click event here, it's gonna execute this C# function, and then this C# function simply updates that count. And this component here is smart enough to know, well, this variable changed, so since that variable is included on the HTML, we need to re-render this portion of the HTML. I think it re-renders the entire page, or the entire component rather. So everything here gets re-rendered, but specifically this paragraph here is what needs to be re-rendered. And so that's what happens. Every time they click that, this function runs, and that gets written out. One other thing you can do is you can log things to the JavaScript console. So maybe you want to write out the current count. You can do something like this. Current count is... And now if I refresh my screen over here, this current count will go back to 0 because we're not saving that anywhere. But now if I open up my console, my JavaScript console, let me just expand that out a little bit more. Now if I click this, we're going to see some messages coming in here. So the C# WebAssembly engine thing can write out to the JavaScript log. But that's kind of nice. Another thing you can do, which is kind of in progress, is debugging. So you can debug through the browser, but that's really kind of inconvenient. They just recently came out with a way to debug the WebAssembly code through Visual Studio. So if I run this in the debugger and set a breakpoint here, I should hit this breakpoint anytime anytime I click that button. We'll see if that works here. So right now that breakpoint is not loaded. When I go to the counter tab, it does get loaded. And now if I click this, I did hit this breakpoint here. And this debugger works really well on smaller projects. I do have a very large project that I work with that it doesn't do so well at. So I think they're making some improvements on that. And but hey, it's a pretty neat technical thing that they have as far as being able to debug WebAssembly. It's quite the feat, so I'm okay with it being a little slow for now. So anyways, I'm gonna not debug this because it goes a little slower that way. Start it back up without debugging. So there we are. So what I want to do is I want to start using SignalR, which is basically a WebSocket type of framework, I guess you could call it, to send messages back and forth to anybody else that would be in my app. And there's some really good links on this. I'll post them in the description after this video. I'll post them in the chat right now. This one here is talking about the Blazor SignalR and how to set that up with Blazor WebAssembly. So I'm just going to kind of go through that and you'll see how it works. So the first thing we need to do in our server project, because this it keeps track of the chat messages on the server, right? Everybody has to be connected via something, so the server is the way to do it. We're going to create a hubs folder, and we'll call it chat hub. So every hub needs to inherit from hub, which is in the Microsoft ASP.NET Core.SignalR NuGet package. So if you don't have that NuGet package, you could always come in here, but I think it's part of this Blazor WebAssembly.server. I'm not exactly sure, but for me, it was available if I just hit quick actions and refactorings. It is available there. Otherwise, I do use the shortcut Control Dot to just bring that up. And anyways, we're going to add that using. So now it inherits from that hub. So the first thing we want to do then is be able to send a message to somebody that's connected in that hub. So if I do something like this, public async task, send message, string user, string message, and I'm just kind of copying that link that I was that I sent over, but we'll change some of it in just a bit. So we're gonna send this receive message notification, and we're gonna pass that in. So somebody on the client side is going to be subscribing to this receive message event, basically, that SignalR sends through, and they're gonna SignalR is gonna send this user and message string back to them. All right, so the next part is we're gonna have to add that to our startup to configure this hub. So in the configure services area here, we're going to do services.add SignalR, and we're going to add services.add response compression. All right, ops. I'm just going to copy this actually, and again, that's from that link that I sent, or I will have in the description. All right, so that's all we need for configure services. In the configure area, we need to do app.use response compression. And we're going to put our hub here in the endpoints. So we'll do endpoints.map hub chat. Come on. Chat hub. And we want to put what endpoint we want that at. So I'll just put it at chat hub like they do in the example. So now I need to add that using statement to the top. All right, I think that's all we have to do for the server side code. Let's add it to our client. So I'm going to make a new page. Let's call this room 1, because eventually I do want to have multiple rooms that people can chat in. But for now, kind of like Slack almost in a certain way, but for now we'll put it in chat, or in room 1. Alright, I'm just going to copy this for right now, and we'll make some changes. Alright, I will make this at /room 1, and we need to, looks like we need to add the SignalR. Let's see if that's a NuGet package we need to add, or what that is. Yes, I believe that is what we need to do there. All right, that should have resolved that. All right, let's see. Let's just run it and see where we're at. And I gotta type this in manually. I probably should put a link on there. So we'll just see what happens. The messages, test message. And there you go. So this actually came back from SignalR, and we can see if that's working by going to a different tab. So both of these should be connected now. So if I send a test message to, came back over here, see we got it. So our SignalR connection is working. We are able to send messages back and forth if you're on different tabs. In a future video, probably the next video, we're going to set aside different rooms to be in, and you'll go to a certain room, be able to see all the messages for that room, and when you leave, you're not going to get those notifications anymore. So I hope this was a good introductory video for Blazor for you, and maybe to SignalR as well. And I hope you stick around for the future videos. All right, thanks for watching.